Hey, everybody, make sure you guys tune in tonight. We're very, very, very excited to have our wonderful guest. We're having a little technical difficulties, but we're gonna work this thing out real good. So make sure you share the video tonight. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. I got my boy Jay on, and we're excited. We're excited for tonight and what tonight will bring. So thank you guys again. Make sure you guys share this video on your pages, to your audience, to your pages. Thank you again. If you guys have any questions throughout the show, just make sure that you post it in our comment section, and we'll definitely bring it up. Hey, Miss Renee, thank you for tuning in tonight. We appreciate you. Hello, Miss Sadie. Thank you again for tuning in. We appreciate you. All right, so real quick, as we try to get Jo on, she's having a little technical difficulties. We're going to hear from our sponsors. Located in downtown Demarcus, a proven leader in law in the Blackbelt, Gibbs and Sellers.
Hello, citizens. My name is Christopher Jones. I'm seeking mayor's office for the great city of Uniontown. For the last 7 years, I've attended city council meetings, spoken with people across the city. I have heard the concerns and have personally seen where improvements need to be made in order for us to move our city forward. As your mayor, I am willing to build a strong local economy, increase youth development, and build solid and sustainable state and federal relationships to aid us in our start of rebuilding our community. Uniontown, it's time for a change. On August 25th, vote for Christopher Jones, the right voice, right now. Paid political advertising to elect Christopher Jones, P.O. Box 1281, Uniontown, Alabama.
All right, guys. Thank you, guys, to our sponsors. We appreciate you. Gibbs and Sellers, as well as Chris Jones for mayor. We now have our special guest. Can you hear me now? We're having a little technical difficulties, guys, but we're gonna make this thing work. Can you hear me now, Joe? She says she can hear us, but I'm not able to hear her on the screen. So maybe we can do this, because we're gonna get her on here. And I hate this, but we can still get there. If you guys have any questions, please make sure that you ask it in the comment. We'll definitely pull up. Hello, Lakina. Thank you guys for tuning in. We appreciate you. Please make sure you share the video. Let me call her back on her cell. Okay, she's calling me back. Okay, so this.
If you give me just a minute, I'll try to go on with my video, okay?
Okay.
Give me like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Bye.
She said give her 2 minutes, guys. All right, so in the meantime, we're going to talk to, I'm going to bring my boy Joe in. I'm sorry, Jay in. I'm going to bring Jay in as he comes in, and so we can have this conversation as she comes up. So please just stay around. We're just having small technical difficulties with the app, but she says she's coming on in. Hey, Jay. Thank
What's
you for
up,
coming.
Portia? Yeah, thanks for having me.
Now, you're the reason. Hey, Aunt Faye, thank you for tuning in, Auntie Faye. I appreciate your love and support. Now, you're the reason why this is happening. Now, I had to bring you on. For those of you guys, Jay has definitely started turning me into a new direction as it relates to my, not so much of, I can't say my way of thinking, because I've always thought that way, but actually putting it in a different perspective. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, kind of steering the ship a little bit. Like you was on the right ship, just might not be in the right direction.
I think that's pretty much fair to say. Jonathan Connor said, hey, Jonathan, thank you for tuning in. Jonathan says, first time watching, follow Dr. Jorgensen. I'm excited to see what your channel is about as well. Oh, appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Miss Sheila Taylor says, Sheila Taylor says, hello, she's watching. Thank you for watching. Shanae Johnson said, thank you, Portia. You're welcome. Now, I got to tell y'all a brief story about how we started. Dr. Joe, I got to call her Dr. Joe. She's getting ready to tune in. And also, I just want to put a disclaimer out. I work at a sexual assault center, so I may tune out because I'm on call. So I just want to throw that out. If I disappear, that's what's happening. But Jay is here to keep the conversation going. Okay, now we got her. Okay, so let's hide this. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm getting ready to introduce to some and present to others the Libertarian candidate for President of the United States, Dr. Joe Jorgensen.
Hello, how are you doing?
I am wonderful. How are you doing?
Great. For some reason, my computer didn't want to do audio only, so here I am video.
Well, that's perfect. We would like to see you video. Your supporters are definitely online here tonight.
Well, you know why? I hope you don't mind. I plugged your show today.
Well, thank you.
I was on a podcast called Roads to Liberty.
And
people were asking me, hey, your schedule's not posted on your website. When are you going to be on again? And I said, well, later this evening, I'm going to be on Portia Takes on the Blackbelt, and I gave them the time. So,
well, hey, I appreciate the plug because it's definitely working. Your supporters have definitely. I was just telling your audience, your supporters, about how Jay, which is here on the bottom, how he was the one who introduced me to you as it relates to what you're about, what the party is about. So we definitely wanted to do that. I want to jump right in because I know we don't have much time with you, but to your support, I am going to get to your question. Just give me a minute. But I wanted to get back to what's happening now. So I want to jump right into that if you don't mind. I talked to Brian, who's awesome, by the way, your communication director. But the seriousness of what's happening. One of the things that I heard you speak about was the elimination of the Immunity Act. I think that's the name of it.
Yeah, Qualified Immunity, exactly.
The Qualified Immunity Act, and how that route is the best route for the justice in which we seek as it relates to police brutality here in our country. What are your thoughts on that, and how that, you know, why do you think that that's the right way to go in order for us to seek the justice in which not just my community, but communities, poor people, as well as community of color?
Well, let me mention, that's just one thing that needs to be done. And basically what that says is if you're a police officer, you don't get to basically get off scot-free or have reduced charges because you're a police officer. That basically you should be charged pretty much like everybody else. But that's only one part. I think another part is, how did we get here? And one of the things is the federal government has basically militarized the police departments around the country. And if you look at crime is a local issue. If it's assault, burglary, robbery, those are local issues, and the local police should handle it. And decisions should be made by the police, mayor, city council, taxpayers, voters, and so forth. And if you look, different parts of the country have different needs. So people in rural Appalachia have a different need, different requirements than downtown New York City. But what has happened instead is the federal government taxes us. We pay a high federal income tax, and then they buy tanks, grenade launchers, and all this other stuff. And they go back to the police departments and they say, hey, how would you like a free grenade launcher? And the police departments really don't want to say no because they know that it was their taxpayer dollars that bought it. Right. You know, they don't want to think, well, if we don't take it, then those people in Texas or Connecticut or whoever, they'll get our money. So they say, sure, we'll take it. And now we have a police with a mentality, not, you know, serve and protect like on the side of the cop car, but it's more an us versus them soldier mentality. Mm-hmm. And they go into it with that. And what's frustrating is, you know, if we have referendums around the country where they ask you, hey, do you want your taxes to go up to maybe, you know, add a gymnasium to the school or build a new park or whatever? You know, some people vote yes, some people vote no. But if you were to have a referendum that said, okay, would you like your taxes raised so our police department can buy a tank. Probably everybody would say, no, we don't want
right.
we would rather have our money go to the school, not a tank. So what happens is the federal government takes our money and then gives us the tank that we don't want, because that's what happens. Anytime the federal government gets involved, you've got one size fits all. They take our money and they decide how it's spent, and not let the local communities do that.
Okay, I think that's a fair assessment of that, and I, because of Jay, like I said, a lot of the things that I've been saying, he's been putting in those particular words, so I can make sure that I'm saying the right thing. And I think the biggest conversation that hasn't happened is how to actually get it done. Things are nice. I tell people this all the time. The changing the names of boulevards is cute. People getting June. At my job, I had Juneteenth off even before it was a trend. You know what I mean? So, those things are cute. But what about real legislative change? And I think that route is the way to go in order for us to seek the justice in that particular area. So I want to do that. Now, I want to get I am in the sexual assault field. I work at Family Services in North Alabama, which is a sexual assault center. It's a rape crisis center serving Marshall and DeKalb County in North Alabama. And so we're in a super rural area, and we're providing these particular services. And as you know, funding is not always a good thing. You're running against two top candidates who both were accused of sexual assault. Yet everybody just talking about, we're going to put money in Bauer, as if this is going to solve the issue instantly, with not being particular on where we're going to put that particular money. As it relates to sexual assault, and as a fighter for victims of sexual assault, can we count on your support as it relates to funding that is specific for rape crisis, actually getting rape kits tested in a timely manner, putting people in positions like in the state of Alabama, just for instance, we have 4 people working a top half of our state. You know what I mean? Funding has been cut tremendously, and people are wondering why, rape kits don't get done in a timely manner, murders don't get done in a timely manner, things like that. So can we count on your support as it relates specifically for sexual assault needs as it relates to our nation?
Well, let me back up a minute.
Okay.
First of all, I'd like to point out, in addition to having a degree in psychology, which is industrial psychology, I also have a master's of social work, which I just received.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I've got a graduate certificate in drug and alcohol studies.
Cool.
So I understand this. I understand completely what the problems are. Now, let's back up, though. What we have to do is we have to ask, what's the best way to get this done?
Okay.
And I would say the federal government is not the best way, and that and basically people need to be held accountable. And let me give you what I think is a great example. So back in the early 90s, the United Way president went out and bought $400,000 worth of fancy artwork, which, keep in mind, that'd be close to like $1 million now. So what happened was donations dried up. The donors were like, we didn't give you money to buy fancy artwork. We gave you money to help those in need, right? So United Way, basically, they had to work their butts off to convince people, okay, now we get it. We're going to put the money where it needs to go. No more fancy artwork, right? Now, imagine that same money going to the federal government to help charity or whatever. What happens if there's high overhead? Nothing. There's no accountability. You can have layers and layers and layers of bureaucracy, and there's no accountability. Whereas if it's in the private sector, like United Way, people say, we're not giving you our money unless you do this right. So if it comes to helping those in need, I think that the private market is a much better way to do it. And especially if you think about it, here's a question that I sometimes ask people, which is, let's say you got $10,000 inheritance. You had a great aunt who died. And so you figure, well, I'm well enough off. I want to give that to those who need. Or those in need. So you maybe look at your church, maybe they can help people, maybe go to a private charity. Right. As you're looking at the different organizations, figuring out who can best spend your money, would you ever say, I think I'll give that money to a federal government program because they know best how to use it? I mean, it's absurd. And what's really frustrating is people like Bill Gates. he has the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Notice, even though he keeps saying, yes, we need more taxes, yes, government needs to be bigger, notice he didn't say that. He didn't take that huge chunk of money and go, here, federal government, you spend it for me. I know you'll do a good job. No, he knows that he and his wife, Melinda, can do a much better job than the federal government. So again, the most I can do is I can say what I am going to do is I'm going to end the income tax. I'm not going to take money from the people of North Alabama. They know better how to spend their money.
Yes.
And yes, and especially, by the way, people in Alabama, don't forget, Cuomo is over there in New York, New York, both New York City and the state, terribly mismanaged, right? And what they are doing is they are specifically looking at states like Alabama, like South Carolina, where I am, states that have opened up. Oh, they're working. Let's go get their money. So what I would say is, Alabama, you get to keep your money. You don't have to give it to New York State. You don't have to give it to New York City. You know best how to spend it. Now, back to the rape kits. That, again, is a police matter. And I think if we brought the police back under the local community and not, put through all this stuff by the federal government, that they would be more responsive. Because what you need are police that you can fire, that you can say, if they're not doing a good job, let's bring in others. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but in Camden, New Jersey, they were doing such a horrible job where they had bribery, all sorts of stuff going on. They basically fired the whole department and started from scratch. I mean, they did rehire some of the people, but they're doing much better now that they just got rid of everybody and started from scratch.
And I think a lot of people get afraid when they hear the word defund. I know a lot of women of domestic violence, they hear defund, they're like, whoa. But to me, I think that defund is not the right word. I think police reform is a better way to say that. And that's just prioritizing where you put your dollars. And that goes back to fiscal responsibility and transparency. Where's your money going? It's one of the things that I heard you say, about limited government. You say that a lot of people, they be like, what do they mean about that? But there's a response. We're smart enough to do things on our own. And as a community, I think it's important that we say that and we do that and show ourselves approved, so we can prove that this is something that we can do for ourselves. You can go ahead.
Well, yes, and you can hold people accountable. Another example, people say, well, we need, let's say, state meat inspectors, or where they come in and look at the restaurants and give you a rating, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, now let's compare that to private industry. Like we've got Zagat and we've got the mobile restaurant guide and all of that. Okay, in the private industry, if let's say I work for the mobile five, whatever they are, when you go around and you give hotels the number of stars, or restaurants the number of stars, right? What if I do a lousy job? You go to a restaurant and you say, wait a minute, this should get 5 stars, this should get 1 star. If you do that often enough, people are going to say, we're not going to pay attention to them. They're going to lose subscriptions. People aren't going to go to their website. They're not going to listen to them. Okay, let's say now you've got a government health inspector who gets bribed, right? Somebody bribes the government health inspector. How do you fire that guy? How do you hold him accountable? You can't say, okay, government, you're doing a bad job. We're not going to give you any more money, because you have to give them money because it's taxes. So they are the least accountable. Yeah. It's like if I use FedEx and they do a great job, great. Maybe they screw something up, so I go to UPS. Now let's see if they do a good job. At least in the free market, you get to choose. Whereas the federal government, if they mess up, they just raise your taxes and nobody gets fired.
And I think that and that's a problem for police officers as well as to politicians. But that we don't have enough time for that today. Now you have a couple of questions. I want to get to. That someone asked about your stance on the 13th Amendment, or something about your stance on the 13th Amendment, or something within the 13th Amendment. The comments are coming really fast, and I lost it. But they had a question about the 13th Amendment. Did you have a stance on the 13th Amendment?
What?
I'm not
Well,
sure.
I mean, are they referring to something on my website?
I think so. Oh, someone asked where can they buy merchandise for your campaign?
You know, we just had a meeting tonight, which is pretty exciting, in which we just picked out logos and we just picked out merchandising and all of that. So we're going to have signs in Oklahoma this weekend. I'm so excited. And I don't know how fast we'll get the t-shirts out, but hopefully soon. But we picked out t-shirts and bumper stickers and yard signs and all sorts of stuff.
Okay. Ashley Tickle, hopefully that person will answer again. Ashley Tickle said, hey, Joe Jorgensen, what's your plan to lower or help student debt or the education for students out of primary school that want to go and learn and better themselves without backbreaking student debt?
Lower student debt. Oh my gosh. Well, and let me tell you, you know how I said I just earned a degree a few years ago?
Right.
So I got my PhD. I was in school from 98 to 2002, and I could easily pay for that while I was working. I was still working full time and I could pay for school. When I went back to get my MSW, like 13 short years later, I was appalled by how much tuition had gone up.
Right.
I mean, we hear about the word spiraling. I mean, yeah, spiraling doesn't even begin to describe it. I was just appalled. So why did the prices go up so much? It's because the federal government put out so many loans that it kind of created like an education bubble. We heard about, you know, the housing bubble. So with all of that money out there, with all these people getting loans, then the colleges said, oh, wow, look at all those people with all that money. We'll just raise our rates because they're walking around with all this money. So that's the problem. And this is why, you know, when people ask me, why are you running for office? My reply is because government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, too intrusive. And worst of all, it usually hurts those it tries to help.
Yeah.
And this is one example.
Amen.
The federal government said, let's help people with loans. Well, by doing that, they had prices go through the roof. You know, it would have been better to not flood the market with those loans. And granted, it would be harder for some than others to go, but still you could do it by working a job. I know, you know, when I got my first college degree, you could actually do that before the government got involved.
Right.
And once again, you know, government's running it. It's a monopoly. Monopolies are just, that's never the best way to do it.
Absolutely not. Kane McCall, he's back, and he says, what is your stance on, that's what the question was. What is your stance on the clause in the 13th Amendment saying that slavery is permitted as a form of punishment?
To be honest with you, I didn't know slavery
Dr. Joe,
that makes no sense to me at all.
I think what the question they're going towards is how the 13th Amendment allowed slavery to be abolished, but then in the ending of the amendment allowed imprisonment to take place, so that slavery in the form of being imprisoned, kind of like the 13th Amendment documentary on Netflix talks about. That's probably where the question's going with that.
Oh, okay. Well, let me just start off by saying part of our problem is we've got too many laws that lock up too many people to begin with. If we only put real criminals in jail and not people who committed so-called victimless crimes, and I would like to mention that basically, we've got racist laws when it comes to the drug laws, and people don't realize it. And it comes in at least two forms. First of all, people of color are more likely to be picked up because police are kind of on the lookout for them more often. And secondly, if you look at the punishment, just the number of years that you get in jail for whatever, it turns out that if you look at, for instance, crack cocaine, which is used more often by people of color, that's got a higher jail sentence than, you know, regular cocaine, which is used more by whites. So that's actually built into the system. Also, Milton Friedman, a Nobel Prize winning economist, pointed out that if drugs were never illegal to begin with, crack cocaine would have never been invented because economically it didn't make sense. If cocaine could be sold the way alcohol was sold, it wouldn't be economically feasible to make crack cocaine. So just like in alcohol prohibition, basically more people went from beer and wine to hard liquor because it's easier to smuggle. Right. That's what happened with our drug industry. So if you look at, but victimless crimes such as simple drug use, simple drug possession, sex work, gambling, simple possession of a gun, anything where there is no real crime, we've got all these people locked up for who shouldn't even be in there. So so when I look at, and by the way, and again, to be honest with you, I never read the end of the 13th Amendment and realized it applied towards prisons. I'll have to go back and look. But the point is, I don't think people would be as upset if we're only talking about, let's say, child rapists and murderers, but if you're a father of 4 and you smoke marijuana and now you're in prison doing hard time, that is absolutely wrong.
Thank you for that. Your screen is frozen, but we can hear you, so don't move right now. All right, so Jonathan Connor says...
I'm sorry, I can't hear anything.
You can't hear me? Your screen is frozen. I don't know what's wrong. Is it raining there or something? Can you hear me? Okay, there you go. Can you hear me now? Are you there? I guess you're gone out. All right, so we're going to keep the conversation going. Jay, did you want to add on to that? I think Jonathan's question is a pretty good question, but we'll leave that up for that. But if you wanted to go ahead until she comes back and finish. Okay, there she go. Let's see what's happening. We have a little technical difficulties, guys, but we're going to keep on going. Thank you guys for tuning in. Now you're back. Now you're back. Okay, we're going to bring you back. We're going to...
I thought maybe I'd said something really wrong because you're looking at me, and I thought, oh no, she really hates it. And then I realized everybody's faces were frozen. So.
Yeah. Okay, so Jonathan says, Dr. Jorgensen, have you begun thinking of how you will negotiate the obstacles that may be presented? I'm trying to see where the question went. Where did the question?
Yeah, let me see the question.
It's not the end of it. Can you re-ask the question again?
Portia, I got a question. Hey, Dr. Joe, part of the audience that mostly fills up with Portia's show is what we call the Blackbelt of Alabama. The rural part, predominantly Black communities. I would say from talking with Portia, they have been majority Democratic voters. Can you talk to them and explain to them how your positions and platform with Spike and the LP will help reverse the things that were put in place by the Great Society, by LBJ, that actually weakened the Black community when the prosperity that they were having before the Great Society was kicked in and put a lot of obstacles in their way so that you can see the Black community actually flourish because of what happened back in the 60s and the LBJ era, if that makes sense.
Well, do you mind if I go back even earlier?
Go ahead.
Okay. So when the slaves were freed, they offered their services, which were excellent services because the slaves did most of the work, right? So they were excellent craftsmen, and they offered their services, which were high quality at a lower price, which is what people do when they go into business. That's what I did when I went into business. I offered lower prices so people would try me out. Well, so what the whites did was they said, what do we do now? Well, instead of offering even lower prices or better quality, they said, we will write laws that will keep them from offering, better stuff that we can't compete with, and enter the Jim Crow laws. So it started out in the beginning. And again, this is where government just has way too much power. And even all the way through Rosa Parks. Of course, we all know the Rosa Parks story of how she was forced to sit in the back of the bus. What a lot of people don't realize is that was a government-run, government-owned bus. And 60% of the ridership at the time were blacks. Now, imagine today, what if Uber discriminated against their best 60%, their best customers? They'd go out of business, as well they should. So the point is with a free market, you can offer your services and get a better foothold. Two other things before I get there. Milton Friedman gave the great example of, imagine you're a baker. If you're going to buy wheat, it makes no sense to buy wheat from a white person at a higher price than a black person at a lower price. Now, can you discriminate? Absolutely. You can say, tell you what, I will buy wheat from the white person because I don't like blacks. But you're going to go out of business or not earn as good of a profit, or you're going to pay a penalty. But when people write laws, as we have now, they get off scot-free. So enter the Great Society. What we had poverty going down, 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 and then they put in the Great Society, and then it kept going down, but just barely. And also what the government did is the government basically put out, and keep in mind, I've got a PhD in psychology, so we talk all about reward and punishment. The way they set up the laws is the government was basically saying, let us be the father to your family. What they would do is they would reward mothers.
Wow.
Yeah, they would reward mothers for not having a man in the house.
Yep.
And we know that the most powerful role model in any child is the same-sex parent. So now we've got many young black, and not just blacks, but people of color. This is and poor whites. But we've got all these young kids, these young boys, without a father in the home because the government basically penalized the mother for having the father there. And so now that role model is gone, and role models are just so important. And I'd like to point out something interesting. I read a study, this was many years ago, when blacks were asked who they would vote for. If it was voting for a party or voting for a politician, they tended to vote Democratic.
Yeah.
However, if it was a referendum, do you want to spend money on this, or do you want your taxes? They voted for the free market. So it's like they knew, looking at the topic, that they knew the right answer. Small government is better. But then when it came to voting for the people, they voted for big government. And I think after Joe Biden explaining to Charlemagne the God, what was it? You ain't black, whatever.
You ain't black if you don't vote for me. Like, be for real. Like, come on, dude. Like, how can that's the craziest thing. I'm not married. My identity is not connected to a political party. And it's like, and that's why Jay brought up, because we talk about this all the time, is that, you cannot, I'm sorry to get passionate about this, but the area that I am in, the Blackbelt of Alabama, is predominantly controlled by Democrats. And it is a poor area. And in the last 20 years, I can't even count on my fingers, outside of a food restaurant, that big business have come to this particular area. It's not because we don't have the land. They love using it. We don't have infrastructure. Well, Google is coming to a part of Alabama that they basically have to restructure the entire town. So that's not even a question on that. It's the fact that we don't have the leadership in place that can do that for. And yet I cannot get, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on tonight, is so that we can see that there are other options other than what we have and what we have been presented. And that you have, good on this side and bad on this side, when the reality of it is we're the ones getting suffering based upon that. Yeah. And I'm tired of it. I am so tired of it. And that's why I began to do my research. Jay was giving me things. I was researching you, and I had to connect, because I want my people, not just black people. I'm talking about poor folk. I'm a working class woman. I want working class people to see that we are not limited to a political party. And if that party does not speak for us, there are other options. And that doesn't mean that we are betraying someone simply because we think that that's not the way that it should be. So I thank you so much for saying all of that. But I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just got excited because I'm like, she been saying what I've been saying. And no, I'm excited.
I would feel the same way because finally, like the Wizard of Oz, when they peek behind the curtain, it's like now the curtain's been lifted under Joe Biden and he feels entitled to your vote and he doesn't have to work for it and he doesn't have to answer to you. And now he's made it crystal clear. And if you look, he's been in government for how many decades? And he says, hey, give me a chance to fix the problem. Well, how come you didn't fix it, in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s.
He wrote the crime bill that Bill Clinton signed.
Right. Absolutely. So we're going to jump a gun one more time, and the comments are coming. Thank you guys for your support, and thank you, Joe, for coming. But someone brought up about trans rights. Recently, we just saw the Supreme Court decision as it relates to LGBTQ rights. What are your thoughts on trans rights and not being discriminated against in the workplace? What are your thoughts on that particular legislation or what SCOTUS decision that just happened?
Well, let me give you one more example how the free market is always more well, I shouldn't say always, but and let me start off by saying utopia is not an option.
Okay.
There's never going to be a perfect answer that does it 100%. What I'm saying is most of the time, the free market does a better job because they have to earn your business. They have to work for your business, and if you don't give it to them, they go bankrupt or they have to try harder. So a lot of people don't realize this, but Disney, the Walt Disney Company, who, by the way, very family, wholesome company, right? They started offering benefits to partners of their gay employees in the early 1990s.
Whoa.
Now, yes, in the 1990s, before, it was like 1993, 1994, 20 years before the government did that. And by the way, did you know that in 2012, both Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were against gay marriage?
That's right.
So 20 years before, 20 years before they're still saying, let's outlaw gay marriage, Walt Disney World is giving benefits to partners of their gay employees because they know if they want the best employees, they can't just limit it to just a small group of people. That if they want the best employees, they have to have women of color, they have to have gays, they have to have, little people, whoever, that there are a wide range of people. And just statistically speaking, if you draw from a bigger group of people, you're going to get better employees than if you just draw from a smaller group.
Right.
So if you look at, again, I would say the free market does a better job. Now, since we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that has race, creed, color, so forth, then yes, of course, that needs to include that because that should be as protected as any other class. However, I still say that the free market does a better job overall than government because there's so what happened when Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton said they were against gay marriage just 8 years ago? They still got nice cushy jobs. They didn't have, the federal government didn't go out of business because people said, hey, we don't agree with you.
Well, because it's a monopoly.
Right. 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 And they stray away from that conversation because they made so many promises that they can't, they made so many promises to so many different people that they can't get out of it. So of course they're not going to say that when they know it's no longer working, especially for working class people. I think that's the other question that I want to come up with. The working class. So many, on both sides. I'm for the middle class. I'm not the middle class. I'm the working poor. You know what I mean? And so, and we're strained. Your essential workers, restaurant, waitresses and things like that have worked through this pandemic with no hazardous pay, with barely an increase of anything like that, have been treated the worst. And yet they're getting the short end on the stick with taxes, still being taken out of their check, doing all this stuff. And I'm still trying to understand who is going to represent us, the real Americans, the hardworking Americans? Is that you?
Yeah. Can I bring your comment back around to education?
Sure.
You know how Bernie Sanders is saying college should be free? Well, if you look currently, now I'm sure the statistics will be changing, but currently, anybody with a college degree is going to earn about $1 million more over their lifetime than someone without a college degree. Mm-hmm. So here's my question. Why should mechanics and grocery store clerks and plumbers have their taxes go to pay for free college to people who become accountants and lawyers and doctors? Uh-huh. How is that fair? Let's have the working people keep their taxes and not have their taxes go. Because, when Bernie Sanders says free college, well, he's not paying for it out of his back pocket. Right. The money's coming from somewhere, and right. It's coming from people who aren't going to college. So then the answer becomes, well, okay, how about if we just tax the people who go to college? Well, then why have taxes at all? Just have people who make extra money pay for it. Like, how does this make any sense?
It don't.
Dr. Joe, could you speak to, I've heard you say it before, but could you speak to your idea of what we need to have done with Social Security?
Yes, an immediate opt-out for younger people because they know it's broken. They know they're not going to see any money. Once again, government, it's hurting the very people it's trying to help. The Social Security system is broken and should have never been there. Now, so if you're in your 20s, 30s, guess what? I would, if it were up to me on day one, you would never have that money taken out of your check. You could have control over that money. You get to choose your retirement. Now, to the people who've been paying in for 50, 60 years, who are dependent upon it, their Social Security money was not put into a lockbox, like Al Gore said. Another Democrat, by the way. Mm-hmm. That money was not put in a lockbox. That money was spent to support the federal government. So what I would do is I would sell government assets such as downtown office buildings, mineral rights, water rights, and take that money and give it to the people who paid into Social Security and say, okay, you now have control over your retirement. You're not under the whims of Congress. You don't have to worry about another cost of living increase from the Congress because now you have your money back and it's yours.
Mm. I think that's.
And can I point out?
Yeah.
If nobody has ever pointed this out to you, Social Security is also racist because the way it works, it's not like life insurance, like whole life, where you get or where you put money aside in the retirement and you get the money and it's a big lump sum, and then when you die it goes to your heirs, right? Right. Social Security, it kind of disappears, right? So you look at who has the shortest lifespan. It's Black men. It's not white men. It's not white women. So Black men and white men equally put into the Social Security system, and yet Black men die off at a younger age, so white men continue to collect it.
Wow. And so, but if you had that option to where your money go, you can say, kind of like an IRA almost, you can say where it is that it go. That's pretty cool. Let me ask you. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is that extra money going into your that goes out of your paycheck would come back to you. And now it's your responsibility to determine how you fund your retirement.
Yep.
We don't need a nanny state to help tell me what I need to do with my money.
With my
Joe Biden thinks you need a nanny state. But would that be better to have, if unfortunately a Black man does die in his 60s instead of his 70s, wouldn't it be great that his children get the money that he saved instead of in the government?
He worked for it.
Exactly.
Oh,
worked hard.
Here's a question. How can we get you, and I saw someone answer it. They're coming too fast, guys, so I'm trying to get to them, but by the time I click on it, it's going away. Someone asked a question. How can we get you to 15% to get you on that debate stage. Joe, you know, I've seen a lot of people, especially people I went to undergrad with, was saying you are a hidden gem. My girl Felicia, she said that like 3 times because she wanted me to put it up there. But you know, like you need to be heard so much greater than what we've been hearing. How can we get you to that point? Because I know it's also a monopoly and it's a game that is to be played. But how can people who want you to be seen by others get you to that platform?
Yeah, tell your friends, neighbors, coworkers. Hopefully they'll tell their friends, neighbors, and coworkers, send them to my website. The good news is in the last election, Gary Johnson got to 13.6%. So he got very close.
Okay.
This year we are just ecstatically overwhelmed in that even from the first week, we had so many non-libertarian volunteers in my campaign. And that's usually very unusual because normally if somebody gets the nomination or they decide to run for office, first it's kind of the core team and family and friends, and then it kind of works out. But first week, we were overwhelmed with how many people from outside the Libertarian Party were joining. Yeah. So again, we got to get the word out. By the way, my website is joj2020.com.
All right. Bridget Johnson asks, what would you do to protect women's autonomy in healthcare, birth control, sterilization, and a thinking capacity?
Again, that is in the Libertarian Party platform that women have complete control. I stand by that. Right now, our government is set up so that abortion is legal and birth control is legal. You know, that right now we do have those freedoms. Mm-hmm. So I'm trying to work on, you know, so if I look at like what's ideal versus where it is, it's not, you know, kind of a small gap. If I look at something like Social Security, huge gap, or healthcare, huge gap. Right. So I'm focusing on those now. But all I can say is right now our laws are pretty much in line with the Libertarian Party platform. And so, you know, basically I'm not going to do anything to make abortion illegal. I can say that.
Okay. I hope she answered your question on that. Jay, I think you had a follow-up question about that as well.
Yeah, well, Joe, I was just wondering because Alabama, we are pretty conservative-leaning, majority pro-life state, and I know that LP platform keeps a lot of people out.
Yeah.
So, what would your thoughts be towards seeing abortion go more to a state choice than from top-down DC? When you have a state like Alabama, who's totally different than California, or a state like Idaho, who's totally different than New York City. Because I would say, like I tell Portia, I would say I'm a little L libertarian because I'm not part of the LP. And I don't know if I can pull that trigger because of that part of the platform, even though I feel like I can support LP candidates, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, and in fact, I was criticized because in the very first debate within the party to see who got the nomination, I was criticized because I was asked if there was one part about the platform, what would I change? And what I said was to get rid of that plank. Now, I didn't say to become pro-life. I said to get rid of that plank because people like Ron Paul, very pro-life, and a lot of people look at our platform and they say, well, I can't be a libertarian because I'm pro-life. And that just kills me because we agree on 90% of everything else. But here's what I would like to point out is that no libertarian would ever vote to spend money on abortions. So for instance, it really broke my heart with Obamacare. Notice Obamacare, do you remember the story about the nuns who were told that they had to provide health care that covered abortion? And the nuns considered that to be murder? I mean, that's tragedy. And even John McCain, when he had the chance to vote to get rid of Obamacare, didn't. So the point is even though the Republican platform might say pro-life, many Republicans will vote to fund Planned Parenthood, or they will vote to keep Obamacare, which would allow abortions, whereas libertarians, they say government should stay out of it. But guess what? If you're pro-life, we will never use one penny, one dime of your tax dollars to fund abortions. And that's something that the Republican Party cannot say.
Portia, I got a comment on that as well.
Okay.
And because of that, speaking to the Republicans who are listening, if Republican governors can shut down states, they can shut down Planned Parenthoods. If they can shut down things because of pandemics, they can do that as well. And they say they're pro-life, but it's only pro-life for children in the womb, and they're not pro-life towards the Middle Eastern children, the Middle Eastern women, and the unconstitutional wars where we bomb people and kill them and label it as collateral damage.
They're pro-birth, not pro-life.
That's right.
They're pro-birth, not pro-life.
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because yes, on my platform is to bring our troops home and turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. There is no reason we should have troops all around the world. First of all, again, taxpayer dollars. Why should taxpayers in Alabama be paying for the defense of Germany and France? Let them pay for their own defense. And secondly, being in the Middle East is just making us less safe. And the irony here is that the job of the military is to protect us, not make us less safe. And it's only because of our meddling in there that we ended up with 9/11. Now, of course, I'm not saying it was justified. Of course, murder is never justified. However, didn't mean to say that. Osama bin Laden, they've got a lot of similar letters. Osama bin Laden would point it out to his followers. Hey, look, they said that they would be gone, that they were here temporarily. It's 20 years later, they're still here. Hey, look, they're trying to take over Islam. Hey, look, they're trying to, and he used that to basically recruit those people into attacking us. And if we hadn't been there, maybe he still could have recruited some, but it would have been a lot harder.
Absolutely.
And of course, and you talked about, something like 85,000 women and children in Yemen alone, some number like that. It's just outrageous.
It is. It's ridiculous. Now, I know we close the time, but I keep seeing a question by 30,000 people on here. I'm just kidding. About Chaz. What are your thoughts about Chaz? C-H-A-Z. Chaz. I keep saying that. Do you have a statement on that? Because you've had several people that ask that over and over again.
Yeah. Well, I would just say it's an interesting experiment. And we get back to what we talked about at the top of the hour. The federal government should not get involved with local policing issues. Yeah. Now, if it comes to somebody's rights being interfered with, if it comes to George Wallace standing on the steps at the University of Alabama, absolutely the federal government needs to get involved. But right now, what they're doing, I mean, that's probably not what I would choose for my personal police department, but I don't live there, so that's up to them. And that's one of the problems, again, is the federal government tries to do a one-size-fits-all, what we want the same thing in rural Alabama as we do in, San Francisco, and it doesn't work. And let me bring up one other thing too. To give you an example of education, for instance, prayer in the school. And I live in South Carolina, so I'm sure a lot of people in Alabama are like people in South Carolina, right, who want prayer in the school.
Right.
Right now, and by the way, we've been cut off, so I don't think I've mentioned this. I don't think I've made this point yet. I'm on a different show when I got cut off. But now, because of the one-size-fits-all Department of Education, which I would get rid of, let's say you want prayer in the school for your child, okay? But let's say your neighbor doesn't. Okay, now, because of the federal government, you're pitted against your neighbor. You have to both vote. You have to both scream and yell about who your candidate is, because that's the only way to get what you want. However, if we got rid of the federal income tax, you get to keep your money and you get to keep your freedoms. And if you want prayer in your school, fine. If your next door neighbor doesn't, fine. There's no reason to have a one size fits all. And that's one of the ways, or one of the reasons, that our country is so divided right now, because in order to get the kind of education, the kind of healthcare, the kind of retirement, anything, you got to go vote for it.
Right.
And there's winners and losers. Why not have it be like, McDonald's, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, Starbucks, where you go to what you want, your neighbor goes to what they want?
I think people, because there's too much like right. You know, they don't know how to function in a society that way, because it does have, I've always said, as long as there are tests in school, there's always be prayer. But at the same time, I think that's important for people to understand. You do what you want to do. Like, I don't understand why that's so hard for people to understand. Like, why do I have to make such a life-changing decision to use the restroom or whatever I want to do? Like, they make it more difficult than it is. In Uniontown, Alabama, they've had some this is in the Blackbelt, they've had some environmental issues as it relates to sewage, coal ash, things like that. And you've made statements about coal ash and like that, and going towards what, nuclear power, I think it is. Real quick, what are your stance on environmental issues in our nation, and eliminating these things for community, particularly poor community? Because in Morgan County, Alabama, which is a predominantly white area, but they have a medium income that is similar to Uniontown, Alabama, which is a predominantly black area, and both are facing environmental issues. So is a infringement on poor folks. What is your thoughts on corporations like that honoring and coming into those particular communities and poisoning those communities where they're going on in their big fancy houses, living it up, environmental free?
Yep. Well, first of all, the one main point I like to make about the environment is if you take a look at the earth and you mark wherever there's big government, socialism, fascism, communism, wherever there's big government, there's big pollution. Wherever there's more freedom, there's less pollution. So technology usually wins out if there's a free market that it can thrive in. So typically, if we can get to less government, we will get to less pollution. Now, I don't know about your specific case, but basically what the federal government has done, and keep in mind, a lot of people complain about the corporations, right? How they have too much power. Well, where do they get the power? Big government gets their power big corporations get their power from big government. And so what does big government do? They let them off the hook. And libertarians view pollution as trespassing, that you can't just let your smoke or your water seepage or whatever. And let me give you one last quick example that has to do with accountability. I'm sure being in Alabama, you remember the Gulf oil spill, right? From years back. And a lot of people said, well, look, see, we need the federal government in charge because look at what this corporation did. But what they don't know was that the federal government put a cap on the liability so that if something did go wrong, the corporation wouldn't have to pay the bill. Now, in a free market, that wouldn't have happened. In a free market, the corporation would have had to have gotten insurance.
Right.
And one of two things would have happened. Either the insurance company would have said, look, it's too risky. We're not going to cover you. If you drill, you're on your own. You're going to go bankrupt if there's a spill. Or they would have said, well, it's kind of risky, so we'll insure you, but we're not going to pay out any, we don't want to pay out any claims because we want to make a profit. So what we will do is we will come out and inspect your rigs every week, every month, every whatever, to make sure that we don't have to pay out a claim. So in other words, somebody had a profit motive to make sure, or somebody would have a profit motive in the free market to make sure that there wasn't a government, or to make sure there wasn't a spill. Whereas when the government gets involved, then it's like, who cares? We'll just let the taxpayers foot the bill. And this is something that Al Gore was guilty of with the sugar growers in Florida. Are you familiar with that? Yep. Where basically, give me campaign money and you can pollute all you want.
Right.
I can't do that in the market. If the government is set to police, courts, and military, you can't do that.
Man, Dr. Joe, I am very impressed with you. Jay, thank you so much for introducing her to me.
I'll try my best, Portia.
Yes, you did. And I mean, he was sending me overload stuff, and I definitely appreciate. He has a 2-week-old baby, so so he has to leave. But I definitely I appreciate. They told me I only had so many minutes, but I appreciate you going over your time. To your supporters, thank you so much for tuning in. If you go to her website, she said that they're getting ready to post, where they her campaign stops, as well as her podcast that she's going to be on, so you guys can tune in. But before we get out of here, Dr. Joe, I'm just going to give you a moment to talk to your supporters, people this is their first time hearing from you. I know my regular audience that's on here. What do you say to them about this upcoming election coming up November the 3rd? And when they get to the ballot box and they see the top two candidates, and then the third candidate, they see Libertarian Party, which will be your name, and Spike, who will be on here July 6th. So come back July 6th, guys. We're going to have a whole hour with Spike, the vice president candidate. But if they see your name on the ballot and they're getting ready to make that decision, what do you want to say to them?
Well, I would say to all of the people who supported Trump, I would say I can understand why you voted for him, because you were sick and tired of big government as they've always been. The reason the polls got it wrong is they didn't poll people who had never voted or hadn't voted in 20 years because they were just sick of it. However, Trump came in promising to get rid of the deficit, give us smaller government, and instead we've got bigger government. We've got even bigger deficits. So if you really wanted the small government that Trump was promising you as an outsider, please check me out, because I am the true outsider. If you are a Democrat, and especially if you are pro-peace, anti-war, the Democratic Party, which has traditionally been the party of pro-peace, they've basically sold you out. They muzzled Tulsi Gabbard, who was giving a great message. They wouldn't let her talk. And if you are interested in free speech, in pro-peace, please check me out. I am the only real alternative for change. So we are for real change, for real people, not the fake change, and not for business as usual. And the media keeps saying 2 old rich white guys. I hope people vote for me for my policies, because I offer the only different policies, not big government 1 versus big government 2. But I will be happy to take any vote for any reason in November to show them that we do have a choice, that they can't just count on our votes because they're feeling entitled.
All right. Well, we definitely appreciate you. Jay, did you have any? Mark, we're going to work on that. I definitely would look into that. You have anything you want to add?
No, I appreciate it, Dr. Joe. I've been telling people, Democratic, Republicans, it's the same bird with a different wing.
Yep. I like that. I like that. And congratulations on the new baby, by the way.
Thank you. Dr. Joe's the only presidential candidate right now or a high party candidate that doesn't have some sexual allegation thrown at her, and she has a PhD. So
yeah.
And an MSW, which I usually don't talk about that, but more degrees than a thermometer, as they say. So,
well, at least you're not arrogant about that. Most people get the PhD there. You have a PhD, you're not that. So that's pretty cool too. So we're definitely appreciate that. Thank you guys for tuning in to Portia Takes on the Black Belt Special Edition. Come back July 6th. July 6th. We're gonna talk to Spike, the vice presidential candidate. I'm excited about that as well. Thank you again, Joe, for coming on and talk to the Black Belt of Alabama. We definitely appreciate you. Definitely appreciate your audience. And guys, have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.